and I'm not even sure how I feel about this. I think I would still tip regardless of what someone is making.
Yeah.
But if you know somebody is making more money, will you drop back your tip?
With this news, came out the news that they're starting to do wraps. Did you see that? They're trying to do more lower calorie wraps, which is like, I mean, if you put all the cheese and everything else, it's not really that much. But do you eat poutine, Josh?
Spell that.
P-O-U. Okay. I need to write it
down. I'm Josh Duke.
And I'm Alex Darus.
And you're either listening to or watching Dine Drink CLE, the podcast where each and every week we're going to be joined by cleveland.com's best and brightest food experts, insiders, and influencers. We are so excited to be back. It's 2024. Hope you guys had a wonderful New Year's and happy holidays and all that good stuff. But, you know, now it's 2024. So what are we talking about?
Yeah, no, great. Happy New Year. We got a lot to go into the new year with. There's some changes in some local restaurants. Melt, very famous grilled cheese bar and restaurant, is closing one of their locations. We have a really interesting conversation about tipping and as it pertains to the restaurant industry. And then we're also going to talk about restaurants to look forward to opening in 2024. There's a lot of new stuff coming up in the greater Cleveland food scene. So we have a lot to be excited about.
Yeah. And joining us right now is Marc Bona. You're going to talk a little bit about the Melt and some of the shakeups we've got going on here in the Cleveland area.
Yeah, Melt is, if you like grilled cheese, Melt is the place to go. And if you like large sandwiches, Melt is definitely the place to go. Melt had a handful of sandwiches, local company, so local chain, if you want to call them that. But they did decide to close their Avon location. They spent 7 years in Avon. And Matt Fish said that really it was about rising cost. It was about labor cost, the cost of goods, fuel, everything. And I think what we're seeing is occasionally we hear this because restaurants have a paper thin profit margin to deal with. And when they came out of and dealt with the coronavirus pandemic, things just became that much more challenging. So I don't think this is an epidemic. I think we'll see a little bit more of it. It does still leave Melt with 5 locations in this area. So, I would call it a local restaurant. I don't know if you want to call, I don't know. I wouldn't say
chain.
Chain. It's they're in Lakewood, Independence, Mentor, Akron, and also in Columbus as well. So.
Yeah. And I know also with this news came out the news that they're starting to do wraps. Did you see that? They're trying to do more lower calorie wraps, which is like, I mean, if you put all the cheese and everything else, it's not really that much. But it seems like they're going to be introducing some new menu items too. So kind of kicking off the year.
I think that's a way to, I kind of applaud them for that because it shows that they are trying to evolve and are trying to change things for the better as they see it. And that's one of the reactions they've had to the market. So I'm sure that they've done market research on that. So that'll be interesting to see how that flies as well.
Yeah, Marc, in your experience, what do you think? Because obviously we kind of continue to see this trend of restaurants continuing to be impacted by COVID, even though it's years later. When do you think that we're going to sort of see that kind of settle down and restaurants will really sort of settle into a new normal?
Yeah, that's a $64,000 question, Josh. Although I've talked to some people and they say we're already starting to see the beginning of kind of coming out of it because, anecdotally, and I've noticed this too, it used to be you could walk down the street and every single small business, especially restaurants and bars, had help wanted signs, out as often as they had an open or close sign. You don't see that as often. There's a couple of reasons for that. Prices did, or I should say wages did go up in order to attract dishwashers in particular and other folks. So I think we're seeing the very beginning of it, but we're dealing with an economy and economic factors. And so I think it's still going to be a little while. I think, it's a tough business. I think people who own a restaurant or a bar have a lot of guts to go into it because the profit margin is just razor thin.
Yeah. No, for sure. And I feel like you said, it's almost like as the COVID pandemic impacts have been going down, we have like inflation and everything else. And it's just like, it's always hard for restaurants, but it feels like it's just unfortunately getting a little harder since COVID too. So
yeah. In terms of the restaurants that sink or swim, sorry to use, I guess, the best phrase that comes to mind, what do you think is like the strategy that you've seen restaurants sort of implement, or strategies that you've seen implement that have made them more successful as
I'm going to
versus
piggyback
others?
on that too, because I think specifically with Melt, what's interesting is like a local chain. So when a restaurant is being successful while also expanding a little bit, like in more than one location like
Right.
that. So
Yeah, I talked to Brandon Krastowski at the very beginning of COVID about just that. And he was saying a lot of people were immediately just folding. And he was saying, I see this as an opportunity. You can get maybe real estate a little cheaper. So that's one answer. Another answer is restaurants do need, like all businesses, especially journalism, we need to evolve. You've got to see the market forces and see what else is working out there. An example is Winking Lizard. Winking Lizard has done pretty well over the years, but they're changing their focus. They were based on a very large, well-culled craft beer selection. They have slowly transitioned, not away from beer, but they've really added bourbon, a lot of good bourbon. They have less single sales. The Lizardville concept, I think, is being pushed aside. They're focusing on bourbon, and then they're kind of something for everyone type of menu. So I just think you do have to find you need to change. I mean, several restaurant owners told me you should physically redesign a restaurant every 7 years. That's just the norm. You just can't be left to atrophy.
Yeah. It sucks that they got rid of their lizards, though.
Oh, the lizards! I forgot.
Them. I don't know if there was like any animal rights problems with that, but I have no idea. But it was probably more, like you said, it was probably part of their effort to evolve and adapt to times and keep
it's a little
going.
antiquated, probably with the iguanas.
I loved them, but it's okay.
Yeah. Well, I think that also kind of goes into our next topic, talking about restaurants and the economic side of it, because Mark wrote a really interesting story about tipping and a push to raise the minimum wage in Ohio. So, Mark, you want to explain a little bit about that?
Yeah, this was interesting. Last year, I wrote a couple of stories, very quick hit stories, dailies. They were very basic. It was about Mayor Bibb showing up at a couple of raise the wage movement type of rallies. And part of it involved grants for local restaurants to help them out as long as they committed to a $15 an hour minimum. That is a proposal that's an initiative through a bunch of local restaurant consortiums. So this raise the wage initiative sounds really good, but there's a lot more to it. We talked about this a minute ago that, COVID really challenged restaurants. Wages did go up in that period of time. But this has been a very, very divisive issue, I think, over time.
Yeah. I mean, because right now the minimum wage is a little over $10, right?
Yeah, it's $10.45, and then the tipping minimum is $5.25. But the two sides on this issue, it was very interesting when I talked to a lot of people about this. And, on one side you have the SEIU, the Service Employees and International Union, and they're saying, look, this evens the playing field. It's not much more money. People should expect a livable wage in what they're doing and what they're earning. And it really is necessary. And they're even saying, look, you got to remember servers in particular, if they have a slow day, they're really not getting paid when you think about it.
Yeah.
On the flip side, though, restaurant owners and the Ohio Restaurant and Hospitality Alliance is saying something else. They're saying, number one, the market should dictate this. We already have it going on. With tips, the average server makes $27 an hour. And that was pretty interesting to me, because that equates on a full-time basis, if you're working the hours, if it's steady, to over like $55,000, $56,000 a year. So now we're in another type of area. And then the other thing that a lot of people disagree on is, and I'm not even sure how I feel about this, I think I would still tip regardless of what someone is making.
Yeah.
But if you know somebody is making more money, will you drop back your tip? I mean, Europe does this differently. It's more of a salary position. They know not to take tips. This is different, though. If you knew somebody is making so much more, would you just hold back the tip? I'm not sure how this is going to play out.
Or if you knew, like, on your receipt there was a service charge or that would you then tip on top of that? Because that might
huge question. It's
a
great question. And we're seeing that right now. I saw something the other day about a healthcare amount on the tip that the consumer, the diner, is paying for.
That's a little bleak to have
it
that.
It is. And it is an industry that doesn't pay healthcare.
Well, yeah, you don't have your
401ks and healthcare and all of that.
benefits. Yeah.
Right. You don't have benefits. So I'm not sure how people are going to, I think people are very individual about how they tip and their approach to it.
Yeah, I think when people, visit these restaurants, I think a lot of times when they get that bill and there's all these various charges or, fees that don't make sense, like you said, the healthcare. Every time I get something like that, I'm like, why don't you just build that into the cost of the food and everything? So I don't even have to think about it. Obviously, I know that's going to raise the cost of everything.
But then the question is, if they put it in the cost of the food and you didn't know that there was that service charge, would you still tip even if that restaurant was paying the $15 minimum wage and it was absorbed through the cost of the food? Would you still tip if you didn't know?
Yeah, I think so. I don't see how that would affect anything. It would just be like going to a restaurant normally. Yeah. I would still tip based on the service, I think. And yeah, I think that. But
then if the menu prices are higher and you're tipping off of that, then your 20% is higher.
That's true. If you're tipping 20%. But anyway, that is true. Yeah, and I'll give you that. And I think that most people will do that. I think you always hear this phrase, like, if you can't afford to tip, don't go out to eat.
Yeah.
I think that is kind of like a little bit, I don't love that phrase. But it also, I think most people kind of follow that a little bit. I think most people tip, and I think if they can't, then they mostly don't go out. I don't know. I'm not
I think I think it probably depends on where, because I've heard like anecdotally that Ohioans are really good tippers. Like, but I'm sure maybe in other places, if you didn't say that and everything, I mean, like that 27 an hour is probably so subjective to again where the restaurant is, how busy they are, stuff like that. It gets really in the weeds. And
I had one reader. I had a lot of readers. This really struck a chord. I had a lot of readers contact me about it, and one person said, I think you really have to look at the type of restaurant you're at when it comes to tipping in terms of the amount of work that's being done. And the person wasn't really siding one way over the other, but their point was, you go to a fine dining restaurant, you're spending a lot of time. One server is spending a lot of time with you, could be for a couple of hours, and the bill probably is pretty high. So the amount, 20% on that, is going to be good for her or him. But then you think about somebody who works really, really hard at a breakfast place. Those checks are very small. They are turning over tables left and right. They're really hustling, and they're not making a whole lot in tips. They have to do a lot more, but are they working any less than that person who knows fine wine and fine dining?
Yeah.
So there's a lot to think about with this. I had another person one person criticized the story and said, you didn't offer any quantifiable evidence. And my answer to him was, there isn't any quantifiable evidence. That's why I talk to people on both sides to kind of get a feel of what are the pros and cons out of this.
Yeah, because I mean, like you said, a restaurant's profit margin is so small too. And it's kind of like the big question is, it's a great idea. I think people should obviously be able to make a living wage, but where do they get the money for it? Like, where do the restaurants get the money?
That's the question. That's exactly right, Alex.
How would automatic gratuity fit into any of this? Because I know that there's a lot of places, not really in the Northeast Ohio, unless maybe, I don't know, I can't really think of any places, but I know whenever I'm on vacation or I go to like these places in Miami, for example, automatic gratuity is a thing. And
or
I know,
parties of 8 over here.
Oh, yeah, exactly. Parties of 8. So where would that fit into this equation? Because I know whenever I go and I sit down and it's automatic gratuity, 9 times out of 10, unless the service was exceptional, I'm not adding on top of that,
See, so you wouldn't tip if it was called automatic gratuity.
Yeah.
But if it was a service charge, you would still tip on it. So it's just wording.
Right. I disagree, because I think the service fee is not going to the
think it's for the service.
I think it's for the restaurant. The automatic gratuity is going, or should be going, directly to the servers. The question is the minimum number of people on the tip. I have never seen on the ticket, I should say, I've never seen that with a party of 2, but I have seen it often with 5 or more.
Oh yeah, 5. Yeah.
And I understand that they're trying to guard against somebody who's spending a lot of time and a lot of money, and then they're going to skate on the bill, so to speak. For 2 people, that's interesting. I mean, if they build it in, they build it in. I don't know if I would tip on top of that. Right now I'm at 25% most of the time when I go out. I don't know. That's a interesting question.
Yeah. Or another thing I think that's a big topic is what about places where it's like you're picking up, or like a fast casual concept, like a Chipotle or like a coffee shop. And now all the iPads have like the tip percentages. I know some people think that you shouldn't have to tip on stuff like that if you don't have a server. What do you
you just struck a chord with me. I was going to bring that up. It is so annoying how we're seeing like tip options on things that ought not to have a tip option. Like, why is it that I go to a gas station and there's a tip option there?
Which, yes,
you know, like, it's crazy, some of these things. So yeah, a lot of these places, I really don't think they should be offering that, and it kind of makes you feel bad. But it's like, why are we doing this? I don't know.
Studies are showing that people are feeling intimidated, and they're already sick of it. And it's a relatively new phenomena. I mean, it really came about as a result of COVID.
Yeah.
You know, more or less.
Yeah. No, I feel like it's just because, I mean, then sometimes, like, if I'm at a coffee shop and I see like the barista, like they're taking time to do my drink, I'm going to tip them. But again, it's like, where does it end with it? You know, like if you're, or if you pick up, I know, takeout food, like you call, you go and you pick it up yourself. Do you still tip on that if it's not delivery?
Yeah, that's a good question.
It's so like, but that's why I think the reader who said the quantifiable evidence, there are just so many factors. You can't really get a solid answer.
Yeah.
But it's crazy.
For sure.
Yeah. So I guess to round out the topic a little more, less debatey, we can talk about upcoming restaurants opening in 2024. There's a lot going on, a lot of changes, especially Van Aken Market District, which we talk about all the time, in Shaker Square. I know there's at least 3 new restaurants that are set to go in there this year and stuff. So Mark, what do you think? What are you excited about in 2024 opening?
There's a lot. You had a good story that really rounded up, I think, more than a dozen places we're looking at. And that doesn't even count the ones that are going to organically pop up all of a sudden. So I know we'll be busy this whole year as we were. I mean, last year, what did we have? 72 or something?
Yeah.
So it was crazy. There's 2 in particular that I'm interested in. One is Oliva. This is an Italian-oriented steakhouse in the old Osteria di Valeria e Al. I always have to be careful how I say that. This was a really neat spot. I liked it. Basement dining. I always felt like I was in a New York restaurant row type of place. It's over on St. Clair. The owners of Luca Italian Cuisine bought it. So Luca and Lola Sema, I like what they've done. They've expanded. I believe this would be their 4th restaurant. They opened Luca in the Flats 10 years ago. Then they opened Luca West in Westlake, and then they opened Acqua di Luca as well, very close to where this new spot is. They really wanted a steakhouse, but they wanted it as they told me, to be a little bit more feminine. I don't think you're going to see these giant 42-ounce porterhouses. I think it's going to be steak with some Italian sides and a little bit more, I don't want to say dainty or delicate, but not quite as hearty as what people might think. So my feeling there is I like their old work, and I'm looking forward to their new one.
Yeah, for sure.
So that's one for sure. And then the other one I'm looking forward to is AJ Rocco's. This is a popular spot. Right next to the Clevelander, right in the heart of the Gateway District. I talked to Brendan Walton last year and did a story on it. And what I'm excited about is this is a whole new concept. It's not just another bar. He's going to have a full kitchen. He's got multiple levels. He's got multiple bars. He's going to have, the whole 9 yards. But the neat thing is he's also turning this into a B&B, an Airbnb.
Oh, cool.
And I was in some of the rooms before it was built out. So they were still working on it. And this goes back 6-7 months ago. I think it's really neat. And I think it's a very smart business decision, because if you're downtown, especially for Guardians games, really more so, and maybe Browns games, but especially for Guardians games, a lot of traveling fans come in and they like to stay as close as they can to the ballpark. They may not want to drive. They want to stumble back after the game or go out to a bar, hit a restaurant, see the downtown tourist spots. This is perfect. They're a block from the stadium. You could stay there. You've got a bar in your basement, essentially. And I think it's really neat. I cannot wait to see. And by the way, the rooftop patio overlooks the stadium.
Wow.
So it is really cool. I think it's going to be a neat spot.
Yeah, AJ Rocco's has been closed for...
It has been closed for a few years. It was open for about 20 years, and it's actually moving to basically next door.
Okay.
They will continue the shared patio with the Clevelander.
Yeah.
So they get along pretty well. And, it really is in the heart of the Gateway. So I think it's pretty neat.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I love a good patio. So you wrote the
Oh,
article.
yeah,
You
no,
have
I have
tons
a
of
couple. Well, kind of going off the steak concept, another steakhouse coming to the west side in Lakewood, where I live, is Artis. It's going to be in the old Side Quest in Lakewood, and the whole vibe is kind of like 80s Art Deco Miami steakhouse. So I think it's going to be really cool because especially in Lakewood, you have so many great bar restaurants or kind of more casual eateries. So to have something a little more upscale too, like I love Sarita in Lakewood. It's just more places like that would be great. And then the other one I'm really excited about, being Il Rione pizza fan, is Lil Ronnie's. Il Rione is opening a pizza by the slice shop. It's going to be in the old Edisons, and it was the Edisons Pizza next door. But it's kind of a place that people are used to going and getting slices of pizza. So especially with Il Rione being one of the most beloved local spots, I think it's just going to be really great to have that in Tremont.
Do you know what happened with those other pizza spots? Or
it was kind of, I know there was the Edison's Pizza was there for a while, and then I know that they still have it in Lucky's Market, and then people kept the name for Edison's Pizza next door. But I think it was a totally different, not the same pizza. So I don't know. I just think it wasn't really it was Edison's Pizza for a really long time, and then it kind of changed hands a little bit. But now it seems like Lil Ronnie's is going to be a good staple.
Yeah, what I liked about your story was it really shows. I think you had 14 restaurants in there, and it really shows they're all different. You had a donut spot. You've got Pizza by the Slice, which is really starting to become its own little style. With Jurassi's downtown has a slice shop, and then I think you wrote about the going into HOB as well. And then you've got a steakhouse, and you've got the stalls in Van Aken, and all these different places. And I like the diversity of the types of offerings that we're going to get. It's not all just the same thing. It's not cookie cutter.
Yeah.
What do you two think is going to be like the most buzzy, the most impactful restaurant opening of 2024 based on what you see on the horizon?
People are really excited about Kiln, which is Doug Katz's next project, who he owns Amba and Jug. He's going to be in the Van Aken. I forget what the space used to be, but it's going to be a pretty big restaurant concept.
Yeah, if that's a great answer, because 2 years ago the answer was Cordelia, and that's still going strong. Last year the answer was Fahrenheit, and good luck getting a table there.
Yeah, still.
And it truly is, and the design there is just amazing. And I think you're right. If I had to bet on that, I would agree with Alex and say Kiln.
But in Van Aken, really, like you said, there's the donut place. There's a few different places going into Van Aken, which it is cool because it's supposed to be an incubator space. So it's kind of supposed to have these in and out businesses, and I think it keeps it exciting. People want to keep going there and checking out what's coming in. So but another one I'm really excited just to shout out is Banter Beer and Wine. They do the sausages and poutine and stuff. They've been closed, it feels like, since before COVID maybe, but they're reopening in Gordon Square, which will be really exciting. So do you eat poutine, Josh?
Spell that.
P-O-U. I need to write it down.
Yeah, go
T-I-N-E.
ahead.
No, but it's fries with gravy and cheese curds. It's like Canadian.
Right. Yeah.
So here's the neat thing about that with Banner. When they decided on poutine, the owners went to Montreal and they just ate nothing but poutine for about 72 hours. They just kept eating poutine after poutine after poutine. I like to try it once in a while. We had it at Schnitzel.
Oh yeah.
Brewery, and that was very good. But once a year is plenty for me. That's it.
No, I like Banter. They used to have like chicken paprikash poutine, which was like a meal. It felt like you didn't even need the sausage.
The food was good. The Polish dog was great there.
Yeah.
I like that once or twice a year. The beer and wine selection, I'm really curious about the new place, whether they're going to be having the same bottle selection they had.
Yeah, that was awesome.
That was incredible. They had a wonderful selection, and they did pretty well with that.
Yeah, I mean, they got a lot of Food Network buzz and stuff like that too. So I think that's a really exciting one to be reopening. So
looking forward to
lots of new places for you.
So that has been our first episode of 2024. Thanks so much for listening. We really appreciate you.
Yeah, and make sure to follow the Dine Drink CLE podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, wherever you listen to your podcast. Follow us on Instagram at Dine Drink CLE, and make sure to subscribe to our newsletter at cleveland.com/newsletters. Thanks.